From the dry halls of the academic world to the TV shows, movies, and video games of popular culture, few military operations in history are as famous as Operation Overlord. Commonly referred to as D-Day, this amphibious assault on the beaches of Normandy, France changed the course of the Second World War, paving the way for the liberation of Western Europe and the eventual downfall of the Third Reich. But while the trials and tribulations of the soldiers participating in the landings are well studied, far fewer are aware of just how much the operation hinged on intelligence and deception. An elaborate web of carefully planted lies and trickery was needed in order to ensure that the men fighting on the beaches would face as little opposition as possible from their German defenders. In this video, we will be examining that web in detail, uncovering the myriad ways the Western Allies deceived the German High Command and obscured the preparations for D-Day. From inflatable tanks to parachuting dummies to spies behind enemy lines, this is the story of Operation Bodyguard. Preparations for Operation Overlord began in mid-1943, almost a year before its scheduled launch date. The Western Allies, led by U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, were under increasing pressure from the Soviet Union, led by Premier Joseph Stalin, to open up a second front in Western Europe against Nazi Germany and thereby divert the Germans' attention away from the beleaguered Soviets in the Eastern Front. At the Tehran Conference in late 1943, as the details of Overlord were being hammered out, a proposal for a deception campaign, codenamed Plan Jail, was presented to the Allied leaders that would involve feeding the German High Command faulty intelligence regarding Allied operations all across Europe. Plan Jail was conceived not as a single operation, but as an umbrella of various sub-operations, whose individual acts of deception would help to craft a larger, false narrative about Allied strategy leading up to D-Day. The most crucial and famous of these was Operation Fortitude, which hoped to trick Adolf Hitler into thinking that the Allies would launch their expected assault at Pas-de-Calais instead of Normandy. Plan Jail was approved on Christmas Day, 1943, rechristened Operation Bodyguard. The name reportedly comes from a remark Winston Churchill gave to Joseph Stalin at the Tehran Conference. In wartime, truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies. The linchpin to Operation Bodyguard was Fortitude. Split into subplans titled Fortitude North and Fortitude South, their overall purpose was to mislead the German High Command as to where the Allies would be staging their long-anticipated invasion of Western Europe. Fortitude North involved the creation of the fictitious British Fourth Army, supposedly amassed in Scotland for a joint invasion of Norway with the Soviet Union. The British happened to have on hand over a dozen captured spies in England, and two of them, Norwegians with the codenames Mutt and Jeff, were converted into double agents. The pair sent fake radio reports to German High Command about the threat posed by the illusory Fourth Army, alongside fabricated conversations about ski bindings and how tanks would perform in below-freezing temperatures. Fortitude North was further supported by Operation Grafham, which involved having the Allies appear to diplomatically threaten Sweden. The British ambassador to Sweden, Victor Millay, was recalled to London in March 1944, after which the Allied governments presented the Swedish government with a list of political and military-related demands. All of them were rejected, just as the Allies wanted. The intent was not actually to drag Sweden into the war, as they declared themselves neutral from the outset, but to reinforce suspicions that the Allies were planning on liberating Scandinavia before moving on Western Europe. These suspicions were passed on by German agents operating in Stockholm, presenting it as evidence of an imminent invasion of Norway. The deception created by Fortitude North was not meant to last forever. The Allies knew that, as D-Day approached, it would be impossible to obscure the buildup of an invasion force in the south of England. Hence, Fortitude South was created. Their goal was to convince the Germans that, should the Allies try to invade through France, they would launch an assault at Pas-de-Calais instead of Normandy. Calais, at first glance, would seem like the most logical location for a cross-channel assault due to it being the closest point in France to the British Isles, a perception that Fortitude South would help reinforce. A massive phantom army known as the 1st U.S. Army Group, or FUSAG, was set up in southeastern England, with Lieutenant General Omar Bradley as its supposed commander. Bradley was soon replaced by General George S. Patton, as the Allies knew he was considered by the Germans to be the Americans' best commander, and therefore the more obvious choice for an invasion force. FUSAG would deploy a variety of both conventional and novel deception techniques. Fake radio transmissions were broadcast regarding troop and supply movements, and fake wedding notices for soldiers were published in local newspapers. To fool German reconnaissance planes, inflatable tanks and dummies were set up and periodically moved around various locations, with rollers simulating tire tracks. Similarly, a flotilla of fake landing crafts constructed from painted canvases were positioned around the mouth of the River Thames. FUSAG even enlisted the help of an Australian actor named M.E. Clifton James, who happened to bear a striking resemblance to British General Bernard Montgomery. After carefully studying Montgomery's behavior and mannerisms, he donned the general's uniform and flew out to bases in Gibraltar and Algiers in May 1944, where German intelligence would be sure to notice him. Surely, Hitler would think, Montgomery couldn't be leading British forces in an amphibious assault in Europe if he had been spending so much time in the Mediterranean. And if all of these elaborate farces were not enough, the Allies launched repeated bombing runs on Pas-de-Calais in the weeks leading up to Overlord. Operation Bodyguard and its subplans did not end once D-Day commenced. On the night of June 5th to June 6th, Operation Titanic saw the British RAF drop dummy parachutists in locations far away from the actual drop zones, rigged to simulate the sound of gunfire and grenade blasts upon landing. These dummies were accompanied by small numbers of real paratroopers instructed to play phonograph records of similar sound effects. In Operations Taxable and Glimmer, Allied planes dropped strips of aluminum, called windows, in the waters outside Calais to give German radar the false impression of an incoming fleet. The most successful of Bodyguard's post-landing deceptions, however, would occur behind enemy lines, with the help of a Spanish businessman named Juan Pujol Garcia. Codenamed Garbo, this double agent hired by the British fed false intelligence to German high command suggesting the Normandy landings were just a red herring, and that an even bigger invasion was about to occur at Calais. To prove it, Garbo reminded High Command that neither the 1st U.S. Army Group nor its commander, General Patton, had moved at all from their location in southeastern England. This kernel of truth, combined with Garbo's good standing with Hitler, helped to sell the deception. While the effectiveness of the individual sub-operations varied, Operation Bodyguard overall was a massive success. Overlord was able to maintain the element of surprise, contributing significantly to its tactical success. But even more significant was that Bodyguard fully convinced Hitler that the German forces in Pas-de-Calais were in constant danger of invasion, leading him to prevent them from being sent to Normandy for 7 weeks following D-Day. It also convinced the Führer to send no less than 27 German divisions away from France to defend Norway. These twin blunders gave the Allies crucial time to build on D-Day's momentum and expand their beachhead in northern France, paving the way for the liberation of the entire country. The Allies, for their part, were keenly aware at every step of Bodyguard whether or not their deceptions worked, as the breaking of the Germans' Enigma code allowed them to listen in on all but the most secret communications between the members of High Command. Not every German official in France fell for the tricks. General Erwin Rommel, who was in charge of defending Normandy, correctly guessed that the Allies would want to land there rather than at Calais, as the latter was too heavily fortified. But enough of them did fall for it, including Hitler himself, that it became general consensus, leading to Rommel's request for reinforcements along Normandy's beaches to be rejected. Operation Bodyguard, as with all of the Allies' most successful campaigns, was a truly collaborative effort. A variety of different operations, each with their own assortment of officers, experts, and spies, were needed for German High Command to take them all seriously. Individually, the deceptions could have easily been dismissed as unreliable, but because there were so many of them, all painting a similar picture, they were difficult to ignore. In a way, Bodyguard can be compared to a theater production, as it takes the work of not just actors, but also directors, writers, artists, and stage crew to put on a convincing performance. It just so happened that the leaders of the Third Reich were in the audience.